Or you're contemplating a move to the Chicago suburbs and you don't even know where to start? Well, in this video, I'm gonna be breaking down the 10 things, actually 11, that you need to know before moving to the Chicago suburbs so that you're gonna feel comfortable that you're finding the right place for you and your family. So stick till the end, because if you're thinking about moving into Cook County, I'm gonna talk about something that will blow your mind and that you probably have no idea. Our taxes are crazy here. And I know people talk about, oh, taxes are high, but there's some nuances to Cook County that you are going to want to stick around for, because it can make or break your decision on buying a house. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. The top things you need to know before moving to the Chicago suburbs. All right, so the number one thing that you need to know before moving to the Chicago suburbs are they're massive, absolutely massive. When you say Chicago suburbs, there's over 200 different suburbs, as I mentioned, so it can be daunting. Where do you even start? It's not like the Chicago suburbs are one entity. I mean, within communities, within villages, you have complexities in micro areas and micro neighborhoods, so it can be a daunting task even if you do know the area, because it's going to be a combination of you're looking for a house, probably commute, maybe a school district. Most of the people that I work with, their families are looking for good schools, they're looking for yards, that type of a thing. But the thing is that the Chicago suburbs are massive and they're very complex. So that's why you need to give me a call. They're so diverse. They're economically diverse. They're geographically diverse. They're socially diverse. There's so many differences between our communities that, you really got to sort of hone in on what's going to be important to you. And another thing, moving here, depending on where you're moving in the country, I will say politically we do lean pretty left in this area. Some areas like Oak Park are really, really left. You start getting down to DuPage County, it gets a little more conservative. But in general, I think that's something that, depending on where you're moving from, if that's important to you, it is, more left-leaning. We are a Democratic state here, a blue state. And that is, especially around the city of Chicago, that is something that comes up. So I do want people to understand that and know that when moving here, it's something to keep in mind. So here's the deal. You got places, you have so many different communities, different areas, depending on where you want to be, what's important. You got a place like Oak Park. We're just west of the city in Oak Park here, right? It's like an urban vibe. You can walk to coffee shops. You can walk to record stores. There's tons of restaurants, mostly within walking distance. You can walk to the bus, to the CTA. You can walk to the Metro, which is our different train options, which I will talk about later. So you have that very urban vibe there. And if that's something, you have 100-year-old homes, old architecture. If that's a vibe you want, you like that density, you like that diversity, then Oak Park might be for you. But maybe it's not, and that's the thing. That's awesome, because what we want to do is find out what is for you. So then you go maybe like 20 minutes west, depending on traffic. That's another thing we'll talk about, to a place like Downers Grove. Now, you'll notice it along the metro lines, right? So we have these metros, all the metro that can get you into downtown, get you out to the suburbs. And along the metro lines, a lot of these towns have these downtown, it's like an old downtown area, like Downers Grove. But then you start getting south of those, north of there, away from the train, and like you'll get a place where, like I mentioned, Downers Grove again, where you can have houses that were maybe built in the 80s, the 70s, the 90s. You're not going to get that sort of closer to the city. The farther west, the farther north and south you get is where you're going to be able to find a little bit newer sort of subdivision cul-de-sac homes. But the trade-off is that if you're not closer to that downtown area along the train lines, the walkability is not great. So if walkability is not important to you, if you don't care about waking up, walking to a coffee shop, you don't mind driving to a restaurant, maybe driving to the train, then your options are more open. But you need to think about the type of community, the type of lifestyle that you want, because we just have so many options for you. And then you go even farther west to Naperville, and southern Naperville specifically, and you could start getting 2,000 bills, that kind of a thing. Now, there's also the North Shore. You talk about places like Lake Forest, Winnetka, Highland Park. There's a lot of massive estates there. You're on Lake Michigan. It's gorgeous. You're talking about like $1 million sort of entry point. Maybe that's the place for you. Once again, you don't know until you talk to somebody who knows this area, and that's why you want to give me a ring. Just, I can figure out sort of what's your vibe you're looking for, what's your price point. Is it even realistic to find a place like that in your price point, in the places you want to be? Because once again, it's a juggling match, right? Commute to work, maybe good schools, maybe the vibe that you're looking for, and that's just a balancing act. And you got to figure out where you are going to fit in this area, which is the massive Chicago suburbs. So same metro area, Chicago suburbs, but totally different vibes from a place like Lake Forest to a place like even like Evanston, which is close by. That's a completely different vibe that you're going to get there. And so that's something that it's hard to know unless you're on the ground. I encourage you, if you can come in for a weekend, first off, weed out that phone call that we have. You're going to be able to weed out like 80% of the places that you are maybe thinking about, or that are out of the 200, and then either come in or something. One thing that I've done, I've actually driven neighborhoods on a virtual call so I can stop, talk about the place, show you. It's not the same as being here, but it's a lot better than just doing Google Street View. So if that's something you're interested in, reach out. So the thing is that where you choose to live is going to determine things like your taxes, and you are going to want to stick around if you're looking in Cook County, because I'm going to talk to you about the craziness that is Cook County taxes. And if you're looking to buy in the next year, there's a reassessment that's going to be happening in some of the communities that you absolutely need to know about, because it can ding you. You can get your taxes increased by like 30, 40, 50%. You need to be aware of that, and I'm always going to talk to you about the taxes. So stick around, because if you're looking at Cook County, there's some crazy stuff that you need to be aware of. School boundaries. Our school boundaries are specific to your property address. We do not have a lot of other options. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's a very important metric for a lot of people when they're looking to buy a home. Your commute times. Commute times are crazy, and they're important, and you need to be aware, right? And you need to be aware of what it's really like, and that's why you're going to want to drive that if you can when you come here, okay? So there's other little nuances as well, like how the streets are plowed, your garbage pickup, little things like that. But all in all, you want to try to pick the best community that fits for you. So when someone calls me and says, hey, I want to move to the Chicago suburbs, it's like, the Chicago suburbs are big. We need to narrow that down. So we need to figure out, do you want more space? Do you want more walkability? What is most important is the school district, and what about the school district? I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. It's not just about ratings, by the way, but generally closer to the city, you get less acreage. Homes are closer together, right? They're older in age. You know, as you start getting more west, more north, you have newer construction, newer homes along the train corridors, and those old downtown areas are generally older houses. But once you branch out of there, you start getting to have newer construction. So there's no one suburb that's going to work for everybody. It's what's best for you. And what you need to know before moving here is that it can be daunting figuring out what is that best suburb if you don't know someone who knows the area and can help you with that. So reach out, give me a call. But one of the things you need to know is that the Chicago suburbs are massive. All right, so something that might shock you and might make you not want to move here is the fact that we have very little new construction. I know a lot of people, if you're moving from like Arizona, Texas, North Carolina, there's a lot of different places where there's, you know, they're building subdivisions with pools and a lot of amenities and things like that. Newer construction, we don't have a lot of that. They're there, but they're very far out. In the Chicago suburbs, most of our homes were built between like 1900 and 1970. All right, so you don't get a lot of new construction communities unless you want to go way far out. What you do find, there's places like Elmhurst has a lot of teardowns. Like there's some in Downers Grove. Even Oak Park has some of those. There's Evanston. There's teardowns in these communities. There's rehabs that have been done. But I'll tell you something. There's a lot of crappy rehabs, and I'm going to help you with that because I work with investors. I've done these types of projects, and I know what bad work is, and I'm not going to let you buy a really poorly constructed house. I'm going to do everything I can to minimize that for you, and that is something you really need to be careful about because you walk in and you want shiny and new. You don't want to worry about a 100-year-old house. If you're moving for some parts of the country, you're not used to old cloth wiring. You're not used to 100-year-old homes with old windows. But I'm going to tell you, a well-constructed old home is going to be better than a poorly rehab flip where they didn't do it properly. They cut corners. You know what I mean? I'm going to caution you on that. You got to find the right one. So you can find updated homes, flipped homes, newer construction. But if you choose a couple specific communities that don't have new subdivisions, which, like I said, they're hard to find, then you're going to be looking for one new construction, and your options are going to be very limited, and it might take you a long time to find a house. We just don't have the land. We don't have big areas where we can build new subdivisions. Like I said, there are pockets here and there. Now, there are some areas, right? If you want that, there's, parts like Yorkville, all right, way down south. You're talking about one of the things with these communities, like you might find something in Yorkville, New Lenox, You know, you might be, Plainfield has a lot of new construction. There's little pockets. You can look at this map here and there where there is new construction, but generally speaking, you are talking about there's not metros around you, right? So if you want to get into the city to commute, you have to drive. They're far out from anything, right? So you don't have much walkability in these communities that we're talking about if you want new construction. So you're just talking about being really far away, like Huntley, New Lenox, Plainfield. These places are going to be in rush hour traffic. I tell you, probably an hour and a half at a minimum to get in. You know, you're talking about 45 minutes, 50 minutes with no traffic to get into the city. So you got to factor that in. That's the balance, right? And then you got to look, what are the school districts? What are the schools like in these areas? So it's really this juggling act. But the lack of new construction, I think, will shock you. If that's what you want and that's what you're looking for, it's going to be hard. You're going to be really out in the hinterlands to find new construction or really find like a one-off here and there. So new construction, not going to find a lot of that in the Chicago suburbs. So another thing that you have to keep in mind about buying new construction and buying a flipped home is the tax issue, okay? And I'm gonna walk you through that. I'm gonna give you an example right now. I have some clients right now that are looking for a rehab. They're looking to buy a rehab home. It's gonna be brand new. I mean, it's an old home, but it's gonna be completely brand new. Plumbing, electrical, everything, siding, insulation. And so that's attractive for a lot of people. There's one that's not too far away that's a new construction, but when you get into these types of homes, you have the chances of having a massive tax increase, and you need to be aware of that. A new construction home, when they're digging a new foundation, they're going to tax you usually, and each suburb is different, 2 to 2.5% of the purchase price. So if you're paying $1 million for that home, you're looking at like $25,000 right off the bat. And it's hard to appeal that because it's a new construction, new certificate of occupancy. You can't get around that. It's very difficult. So if you buy a rehab home right next door, your chances of not having that massive tax increase are a lot higher. Another little tip here, and this is why, if you want to work with someone who's going to shoot you straight and help you, guide you through the process of not buying a poorly constructed home, bad craftsmanship, and also little things like this. My clients are looking to buy this house. We are going through a reassessment in the community that they're looking for. We are going to be going through, that means they're going to take all of the 2025 sales and they're going to reassess and come up with a new value for your property. So if my clients buy this house on December 31st, 2025, it's going to be fair game for that reassessment. If we wait, because it's under construction, until January 1st, they're going to potentially have a 3-year period where they're not going to get dinged on the new value, because the new value is what they would pay for is going to be like double of what that house is currently assessed at. So those are little tips. I'm telling you, I've worked with a lot of rehabbers. I do not want you to buy a house that has hidden water damage, that they did poor craftsmanship. I always say to my clients, I would rather you not buy a house than buy the wrong house. And I truly mean that. And if you want to work with someone who is going to treat you like that and who's going to walk you through the stuff and is going to more often than not tell you not to buy a house. It's funny, most of my clients tell their friends, are like, well, you just kept wanting to buy houses and you kept telling us you can't buy this house, you can't buy this house. Because I'm going to have a conversation with you, I'm going to learn what's important to you, and I'm going to make sure that you buy the right house and not make a rash decision just because we have a lack of inventory and it's hard to find what you're looking for. So, lacking new construction, but new construction to me isn't always a great option, especially when you factor in the taxes. All right, new construction. This is a perfect example. This is a perfect example of what you can expect from new construction. I told you, we don't have a lot of these subdivisions where, you have all these amenities and stuff. What you find is these one-off houses. This is a new construction behind me, and this one right next to it is definitely not a new construction. It might be one day, but it's not now. So that's what you have a lot of, is these one houses here, one house here. Now this block has a good mix of new construction and old. This one right behind me, that's definitely new construction. That over there, those first two, definitely not new construction. So someday those will probably be torn down, but that's what you get. You get one house here, that kind of a thing. So they can be hard to find. But if you want new construction, we have them. But especially if you want to be close to the trains and close to the city, you are not going to have the amenities, the lifestyle, the huge new construction subdivisions. You're going to find one here, and usually they're pretty expensive compared to the marketplace. So anyways, that's what this is a perfect example of what you can expect new construction wise, basically being a block of, a mix of new construction, a mix of old stuff, And that's what you're gonna find around here in the Chicago suburbs. All right, so if you are moving to the Chicago suburbs, there is something that you absolutely need to know. Absolutely, and that is it's super competitive. And if you're trying to do this from afar, it can be an absolute nightmare. We have properties that go in hours. I want you to understand the market that you're getting into. Communities that have good schools, public transportation to get you into the city and have a good, community vibe and a good reputation. Those communities are selling like this, like crazy. I'm telling you right now in 2025, our market is appreciated in some places 19% over last year. Some areas have median market times of 9 days. That's right, 9 days. And good properties around here are selling within a day, multiple offers. I have had almost every single deal in the last 2 years I've been a part of has been multiple offers. My clients having to go sometimes $50,000 over asking. People are regularly going $100,000 over asking. They're waiving their appraisals gaps, right? So they're putting appraisal gap waivers in there. They're waiving the need to have an appraisal. Most of them are all going as is. So how do you manage that from afar? If you need to sell your house somewhere else and then buy a house here, good luck. It ain't going to happen. I'm telling you, you got to get that in order now. That's why you want to give me a call so we can walk through the reality of what you're thinking and the time frame. If you think you're going to come here on a weekend and buy a house, you're going to buy a crappy house. Because when you call me on Monday and say, hey, we're coming in this weekend and I want you to get a list of places together, the good ones are going to be gone by the weekend because that's what we have right now. So how do you manage that? Well, that's one of the things. You want to call me so we can walk through what you're thinking. One, to time that with where your move. You might decide that you need to come here and rent. And that might be the best thing for you. It's difficult to find a rental property. Nobody likes moving twice, but it's better than buying the wrong house. I will say always, I'd rather you buy no house than the wrong house. Another thing that I do, if this interests you, give me a ring. I do a lot of video tours. I want to tell you a story about how I got some clients from DC that were coming. We had the conversation. They were telling me how they were going to sell their place and come here and buy a place within a month. I said, you are going to put yourself in a stressful situation of being forced to try to find a house in a market where you might only have 4 houses come on in the month that you would actually buy. And then you might lose that because of multiple offers. And so we worked out a plan. They did come, and I highly recommend come get a lay of the land so that you get a feel for where you might want to be in the town. And then what I did is I actually did a video tour, and we made an offer based on that video tour. Now, you might say, I'm not comfortable buying a place just off a video tour, and I wouldn't necessarily be either, but you can always fly in, do an inspection, and if you're not comfortable, you can walk away from that property. You're not going to lose your earnest money. You're not going to put yourself in jeopardy. I'm never going to let you do that. But the reason we got that under contract, I want to tell you, we actually beat a cash offer that was higher than ours. But I'm a local agent. The other agent liked me. They knew me. The seller was actually a little bit nervous about accepting an offer from a couple that didn't actually see it in person. But that's my job. I made them feel comfortable. I told them we're going to get through this. We're going to get this place closed. And they went and they did that. And the seller accepted that offer because they knew they were working with an agent who could get that deal done. But I want to prep you for how difficult it can be to manage this process from afar when you have a market where good properties, they sell like this, literally like this, and be ready to pay over asking. And so you just need to be ready. You need to prepare yourself that you're not going to be a contingent. You need to prepare yourself that you're probably going to have to go in as is, meaning you can't ask the seller for any repairs or anything like that. And this is not me trying to force you into a house. It's me educating you on the market. So anyways, so if you're thinking about moving to the Chicago suburbs, I don't know what's going to happen in 2026, but right now, and what we've seen for the last decade is the spring markets are crazy, over asking, multiple offers. So you need to prepare yourself for that. That's why you want to call me, even if you're thinking, hey, we're not going to be moving for 6 months. We want to get you ready and prepared so that you make the best decision and you get the best house. So prepare yourself. I don't care if it's a year from now. give me a call so we can start walking through this and getting you in a position so that you could stand out and you can get the house of your dreams. So another thing, if you're moving to the Chicago suburbs, that you need to be aware of is that not all school districts are created equal, and we have a lot of weirdness in our school districts. So what am I talking about here? If you're moving to the suburbs, you probably having kids, even if you're moving from the city of Chicago. I get that a lot, moving from Chicago, get a kid, move out to the suburbs. Or if we're moving here from out of the area, then you are probably going to be looking at school districts if you have a family. Maybe not, and maybe that's not important to you, but if it is, you need to be aware of a lot of things. So, and if you're like most of my clients, you're probably going, okay, I'm going to go to niche.com or Great Schools or ChatGPT and say, hey, what are the best school districts in Chicago, in the Chicago suburbs? And that's not a bad place to start, but you really want to talk to someone local who knows the area and can help guide you and talk to you about what's most important to you. And I'm going to give you some tips on things you can do to dig a little deeper to make sure that the experience is what is going to be good for you and for your family. So one thing you need to know is, first off, the Chicago public schools, if you're looking to move here, one of the reasons most people move to the suburbs is because the Chicago schools are a bit of a mess, not only in terms of boundaries and getting into schools, but generally they're not rated super high. Once again, I'm talking about the great ratings and great schools. So a lot of people want to move. You might go, oh, well, I work in the city, I want to live in the city, but you're going to want to take a look at the school districts. And one of the other things you need to know is our school districts, it's completely based on where you live. Okay, we do not have a lot of charter schools. We do not have, outside of like Catholic school options, a lot of other options. So where you purchase your house is generally where you're going to send your kid to school. And that's why it can be so competitive, because good school districts have high demand. But you want to know there's nuances. Like if you're looking here, let's take, for example, a town like Brookfield. You would think, okay, Brookfield, I'm looking at Brookfield, I want to buy a house. Okay, I'm going to go to this, if I send my kid to this school, well, listen, there are 4 different elementary districts in Brookfield, just elementary schools, 4 different school districts. So depending on where you live, you're going to go to a completely different school than your neighbor, maybe. We have weird boundaries like that. So literally you can have your block is cut in half. If you look right here, one side of the street's going to go to one school and the other side is going to go to the other school. Now, that is not like the reason necessarily to buy a house, but you do want to be aware that the kid across the street might not go to the same grade school as your kid. And when you start getting to places like LaGrange, which like Lyons Township, that high school has half of the kids, they have a campus for freshmen and sophomore, and then one for juniors and seniors. So when your kid turns into a junior or senior, your commute time might double. You also have like 15 or 16 different communities that go to that high school. It's massive. Now, once again, that might not matter to you, but it's just something to keep in mind. One of those little nuances that if it's important, you want to factor that into your day-to-day. Also, your kid might have his best friend might be 3 towns over, which just as in terms of logistics might be a bit of an issue. But that's the thing. Riverside Brookfield High School is about half the size. So size might be important to you, but our school districts can be complicated. Like I said, LaGrange, Lyons Township, you have that sort of a wonky sophomores and freshmen and sophomores. That's not super common. Not all places have 4 different school districts. Elmhurst has 1 school district for the entire community. So there's these little nuances, and it can be complicated. And if you're specifically want one school district, you got to make sure that that house is in the school district. That's why you want to reach out to me. I can help you with that kind of stuff. So I mentioned the school districts can be sort of hard to figure out. We don't have one unified system. Each community has its own nuances and everything like that. Well, one thing that I'm big on is, ratings are okay, right? You got to start somewhere. But I want to give you some tips on things that you can do to try to dig a little deeper. There's the Illinois School Report Card, and you can dig deep into this Illinois School Report Card. You can find out the amount of money per student, the number of teachers that have master's degrees, how many kids are on the school lunch program. You can really dig deep into some statistics here. Now, another thing that you can do, so that's something that I encourage you to do. Go to the Illinois School Report Card. You can compare 2 schools and look at how they rate in science, how they rate in math. That's something that you can do. That's a powerful tool if you're trying to compare 2 schools. Because, for instance, what's important to your kid? Your kid might really love sports, or they might be into arts, or they might be into math. And another thing you can do, you can go to the school's website and you can open up their curriculum, right? They usually have like a PDF where it has all of the courses, it has all the stuff about the schools. You can go in there. A lot of times you can find the administrators, you can email them, you can reach out and give them a phone call. If you want to talk to someone in the arts department, there's a lot of times you can find the head of the arts department, the teachers that are in the arts department. You can email those people, you can try to set up an appointment, and that's something, if you have the time and schools are that important to you, then that is something else you're going to want to do rather than just looking at the ratings. Another little tip, you might want to, especially once you hone in, if you're like picking a couple different communities, there's usually Facebook groups that they will let you join. There's a lot of moms Facebook groups, a lot of local Facebook groups where you can learn about the schools. The schools probably have there's like their own sort of or private Facebook group for people, parents at those schools that you can jump into and try to get a little bit more local knowledge and from people who have kids that are going to that school. So those are some things that I think that you can do to better set yourself up for not just looking at like, oh, great schools, it's 7 out of 10. And another thing, it's funny, just the other day I was looking at the property and it was rated, the grade school was rated 4 out of 10 2 weeks ago. It's now 7 out of 10. Literally, I mean, 2 weeks ago, I was showing some clients a house and they wanted to know the school rating. And I look it up because to me, school ratings, they change from a 4 to a 7 in a couple weeks. And that's crazy. So just going on those test scores alone, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But that is something that you have to pay attention to. Not all school districts are created equal. If you see a house that looks amazing and it seems cheap, there's probably a reason. And I almost guarantee you it's going to be school district or a micro location. So you want to reach out if you want to have a little bit more of a conversation about this, and I'll talk to you about what's most important to you, and we can help find out the community that's going to work best for you. Our values are based on school districts. So much of our property values are driven by school districts, especially the high schools, and that's why you really want to pay attention to that. Now, take example of, and you would think, oh, 2 places that are close to each other, yeah, why would I buy here if the property or if the house costs are so much lower? You take a place like Oak Park here, right? The high school is rated 9 out of 10. Now, the taxes are pretty high and the property values are also high, but you have a high school that's a 9 out of 10. That's the type of thing that's going to preserve your value, especially in a hot market where we've had appreciation for the last decade. You compare that with Forest Park. That is literally the town right next door, Forest Park. And the Proviso East is a 2 out of 10. So you get a feel for why the values in one community are going to be very different than the other community, and you want to pay attention. So Oak Park here, 9 out of 10 high school. Forest Park right next door, 2 out of 10 high school. I know I have a lot of clients that they don't have the money to necessarily buy maybe in Oak Park or River Forest or a place like Evanston or LaGrange, so they go into a place like Forest Park that might not have as good of high school ratings. And eventually what I see happen a lot is later on they feel forced to make a move, and you never want to be forced to make a move because it's going to cost you in the end. You never know what the market's going to be like when you need to sell. So you want to make sure you try to buy a house in a community that you want to stay in for as long as possible, in a market that has high appreciation right now. We've had value increases. So you want to be able to try to stay in that house for as long as you can so you don't lose money, and that's what I'm going to help you with. All right, so walkability. I want to talk to you a little bit about walkability vibe of a community, right? So here I am, I'm in Burr Ridge, which is not too far from LaGrange. It's not too far from Downers Grove, but this is the style here, right? This is their downtown area, basically. They don't really have a downtown area. This is basically like being in California, these type of places I've been to where you just have basically strip malls. This is the vibe you get here, right? If you look behind me, they have like a big shopping complex. They do not have what you would consider quaint, traditional downtown. You're far from any metro station. Now, so it's gonna have a completely different vibe here. You're not walking to a coffee shop, and if you do, it's just sort of a different feel. So this is Burr Ridge here. I just wanna show you some of the differences in community walkability and the feel you get here. This is not like being in downtown LaGrange or downtown Oak Park. Sort of the farther west and southwest you start getting into this. So I'm in Burr Ridge here, and this is the vibe you're gonna get. This is actually a pretty awesome bakery behind me, but it's just not sort of that sort of small town, sort of old charm vibe you get here. It's much more of a modern type of a feel. So maybe that's for you, but this is Burr Ridge, and walkability here is you're not really walking to these places. You're gonna drive here and you're gonna park in this parking lot here. So this is Burr Ridge for you, and a little bit about how different feels we get in these communities. And I'm going to show you downtown Downers Grove to give you an example of a little bit different of a vibe. All right, so walkability, we've been talking about walkability, the vibe, the feel of a community. Well, I'm in Downers Grove, and I think this is a perfect example of walkability because it's not consistent within the community. You can imagine some of these places are big. I'm in South Downers Grove here, which one has a different school district, which we talked about. South Downers Grove South versus Downers Grove North. Some people have a preference. If you do, this might not be the area for you, but that's what you need to look into. Now, but in terms of walkability, I'm 2 miles from the Metro. It would take me almost an hour to walk to the Metro from here, more or less. Well, if I walk slow, but also the routes that you have to take, all that kind of stuff. But what you get here, I'm outside of this house, which actually has an open house today, South Downers Grove. Now, this is much more of like a subdivision vibe. You're talking about 60s, 70s construction here. So you're more sort of traditional subdivision where you have very sort of cookie cutter similar models here. But this is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, a little over 2,000 square feet for $449, which is a pretty good price here. So walkability is within each community is totally different. And this is the type of vibe that you can get, you know, when you're in this area here. How's it going? You like that house? All right, you gonna buy it? Right. You got to move quick if you're gonna buy it. So, anyways, this is a completely different vibe. You get into downtown Downers Grove, downtown LaGrange areas here. That's where you're gonna have your old houses, 1800s, early 1900s. Here you have that, you know, if you like more of that newer construction, this is not new. Like I said, we don't have a lot of new houses around here, but this is an example of an area in Downers Grove that's gonna be completely different. And where within each community, you can have a completely different vibe if you're on the north side, south side. So that is some walkability stuff and sort of just the feel that we have in these communities here in Downers Grove. When you talk about walkability, well, I'm in Downers Grove, about a half a mile from downtown Downers Grove, which I told you has a cool downtown area. And look at this house behind me. This is probably from the 1800s. And then this home next to me right here, at some point was a new construction. So you don't have your $400,000 houses like you do in South Downers Grove here, but you'll be able to walk to the train. You start getting into the 800, a million around here, but you do have a mix of new construction, older, but this walkability thing is important. And one of the reasons these homes, not only are they bigger than some of the homes in the subdivisions, but the closer you are to the train, the more value you have. So I'm gonna show you the downtown area, but just a little bit of all walkability here is I'm a half a mile, it's gonna be about 13 minutes or so for me to walk. And this is a beautiful cul-de-sac street here. Pretty idyllic, you know, a lot of very nice homes, lawns taken care of. So walkability here in Downers Grove. That's one of the cool things. You can get to these places by train. If you live, you know, you can get into the city 25, 30 minutes here. Once you get to the train, of course. But these are some of the, as long as you're along that train route, you can get downtown somewhat easily. And that's the thing. If it's important to you, you want to try to look for homes that are close to there that you can walk. All right, so if you're thinking about moving to the Chicago suburbs, you probably want to get a feel for what it's going to cost you to live here, right? To own a home, to maintain a home, all those things. Well, I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about why it might cost you more than you think. And you need to budget that when you're thinking about moving here and when you're negotiating that job offer, right? Because the cost of living here, specifically the taxes, which I'm going to talk about, which is not a joke, but anyways, from where you're coming from, most likely your property taxes are going to be way higher than you are used to and way more complicated. So if they're an issue, if taxes are an issue, you're going to want to stick around till the end of this video, because Cook County specifically has a very crazy sort of, I call it crazy. It feels like you're in a fight every 3 years because they do what's called a triennial reassessment. And I'm going to talk about that more specifically. And if you are thinking about buying in the next 6 to 12 months in Cook County specifically, you absolutely need to stay, because we're going through something right now. We're always going through it, that depending on what community you're buying in could really give you a sticker shock when that new tax bill comes out, which is something that I'm gonna talk about. But your taxes, you probably aren't used to having taxes for property taxes like 2% or so. You have some communities, I'm talking about tax bills, $20,000 for your property, sometimes $30,000. Now that is not the norm, but you're looking at, Cook County, you might have easily $10,000 to $15,000 taxes. Now that same home in DuPage County, once again, depending on the community and where, the specifics about the house, which is one other thing that makes this all so confusing. In DuPage, maybe that property is, 3, 4,000, 5,000 less in taxes, right? So that's something you want to consider as you're looking at these properties, but the taxes are going to be something that you're not going to probably be used to. And so you're definitely not going to be used to things like one house right next to each other, similar square footage being assessed, or have a tax bill that is way different. And some of that has to do with, have they actually appealed and done those things, which a lot of people don't appeal. And that's why you want to reach out to me. I help all my clients appeal I reach out, I look into the situation every year to make sure, hey, does it make sense? The triennial reassessments. I'm going through all of my clients and making sure that seeing what that new value is, because that's where you have a crazy high jump, which I mentioned I'm going to talk about. But you could have 2 houses on the same block, and you have to be careful with senior freeze exemptions, which is something you want to reach out to me about. You might see a house online and $8,000 taxes, but there's a senior freeze that you don't know how to find that I do, right? That it actually might be an extra $8,000 or $7,000 because the senior can get a freeze if they only make a certain amount of income. So the thing that's even crazier about the taxes here, I mentioned with Cook County, having the triennial reassessment, but even crazier, every community has their own tax rate. So when I say, the average, or it's 2%, well, some places it's 3%, some places it's less than that. So every community has its own tax rate, which makes it even more daunting and more confusing for you if you're really trying to figure out how much you can afford. So keep that in mind when you're looking at homes, and I can work through that with you. So the cost of living here, you need to factor in the property taxes and the potential increase in property taxes. If you are going up to your max, and we look at that tax bill, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at that assessed value every time that you're interested in making an offer, so that you have an idea, hey man, this house might go up crazy. Now, we never know, and I'm going to talk about that later. So the taxes here are a cost of living issue that you need to really pay attention to when you're making a decision to move from one place to another and to accept a job. Now, in terms of home costs, we have over 200 communities. There are a massive range of values. Anywhere from, a $300,000 house to $3-4 million, you know what I mean? So they're all over the place. In my experience with the clients I work with, who are generally speaking, if they're looking for single family homes, they have kids, they want a good school, they probably want to be able to commute into the city, they want to have a safe feel environment, that kind of a thing. They want to have a pretty decent sized home. What you can expect, this is general, is you're probably looking at $550,000 to $700,000 entry point for most of those communities, sort of a base with those, features of, highly rated schools, high safety ratings, proximity to downtown, those types of things. That's what you're looking at. And you have some communities, Burr Ridge, you're looking at $900,000. You have Oak Park, your median sales price is like in the 640s. Right next door, River Forest, that shares the same high school, you're looking at in the 900,000s. And a lot of that has to do with the styles of homes, which is what you want to talk to me about, because I can figure out and help you figure out what community is going to make sense for you based on like the style of home you want, your price point. Some you got to write off. You're not going to be able to afford them, or they don't have, you can afford more than that community can offer you, right? And so you got to find the right fit for you. But what about utility costs? That's another thing that people don't sometimes factor in. In the wintertime, your gas bill is going to be off the charts because it gets freezing and you're going to heat your home with gas. And so you're looking at, sometimes in the wintertime, big homes, not well insulated. This is the Chicago suburbs, remember? We got a lot really old homes that are not properly insulated. You could be $300, $400, maybe even $500 a month for your gas bill. And they have a program at NICOR where you can space that out, because a lot of people are like, and I can't have a $40 bill in the summertime because I don't use any gas, and a $500 in the wintertime. So you can balance that out with like a payment plan that you can work out with NICOR. And it's going to be the inverse of that. Your electricity bill, you know this if you're coming from a hot place because you run that AC and stuff. So in the summer, when we have 90-degree days, it's extremely humid, which you have to factor in. We have a lot of extremes here that screw with your house, that mess with your house. But in the summertime, your electricity bill is going to be $200 or $300. So you want to factor that in. And one of the things that I can help you do, or that I do with my clients, if you're serious about making an offer on a place, I can call the electricity company, the gas company, and get an average bill. Now, that's only going to go so far for the last 12 months, right? That's only going to go so far if that's a single person in there and you're going to have 3 kids and 2 adults, then yeah, the bills are probably going to be different. But at least it's a base point to start off of. But you have to factor that in, the utilities here, which I think are going to might shock you a little bit depending on where you're coming from. Another thing, lastly, about homes is when you're choosing a home, the type of home can really have an effect on what you're going to pay and how much it's going to cost you. We have extremely brutal and cold winters and very hot and humid summers, and that does a number on homes. Ice damage, freezing and thawing, if you have a frame home, that home is going to take a beating. You're going to need to paint that more frequently than you might in another area. The freezing and thawing gets in cracks. You have to pay attention to those things. In your stucco home, you start getting cracks, the freezing and thawing. You just need to worry. You need to pay more attention maintenance-wise in the Chicago suburbs than you might in other areas because of our extreme temperatures there. So I think one of the things that you really need to take into account is the overall cost of what that house is going to cost you, and the taxes are a big part of it and probably going to be a shock for you when you're moving there. So that's one of the things you need to know about the Chicago suburbs. And so when you're looking for how much it's going to cost you to move out to the Chicago suburbs, you have to keep in mind all of those things, the taxes, because you know what? One house that's on the market for $600,000, but the taxes are $25,000. It's going to be a lot different than a $600,000 house where the taxes are $15,000, right? That house is all at the $15,000 taxes. Maybe that fits into your budget all of a sudden. So it's not just about the purchase price, especially around here when you have these wild swings in taxes from community to community and from house to house, block to block. Keep that in mind. That is very important. And I want to talk about something that you need to stop doing immediately if you are looking to move here from afar and Googling, and that's looking at it and saying, hey, this community's 10 miles west and this community's 15 miles west. So it'll only be another, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. I'm telling you, that is off the table here in the Chicago suburbs. And I'm going to talk to you about why being 10 miles might feel like you're 100 miles because of the traffic and the metro options, things like that. So commute is a huge part of how you're going to make your decision, most likely, unless you're a remote worker, and even then you might have to go to the office. So many of my clients, it's that balance of commute, schools, house, price point, all that kind of stuff. And here's the deal. We have a couple options. You can drive, obviously, or we have a metro system. And if you look at this metro map, that's one thing that's awesome, and it spreads out. And so many people make their choices based on the metro. But is the metro right for you? And is the metro in the town that you're moving to right for you? And is the expressway right for you? These are questions that are hard to answer from afar. So that's where living 30 minutes from downtown can mean a lot of different things. If that means you need to get into downtown by 30 minutes, your options are going to be limited because you have to get to where you're going. There's traffic stuff that I'm going to talk about that you have to be concerned about, right? So is the metro for you? For me, it's not. I can't take having to be on the schedule all the time and getting to the metro the same place every day. When you get there, if you want to do a metro, you have to think about, is there express trains? How long is it actually going to take you? Can you park there? You can actually go and search on the metro website and pull up a station, and it'll show you how many parking spots there are. You can click on a map. It'll show you where those parking garages are, where the parking spots are, ADA if that's important. So that's something that you want to start doing. But not every metro station is created equal. And within towns, you might be 20 minutes from the metro station. And does that even make sense then for you? Or are you going to have to drive every day? And I'm going to be talking about driving in a second. So to wrap up the metro thing is you want to see, is the metro a good option for you? And does it make sense for you and your day to day? If you're going to be having to maybe come back and rush in for a kid that has some issues at school or something comes up, maybe that's not the issue. Maybe that's not what's going to work best for you. So then you got to look into driving. So let's talk about driving because it is crazy. Speaking of metro, you can get downtown from Naperville, 35 minutes or so on an express train. Now, if you are in Northrop Park, this is what's crazy about these little micro areas and traffic and stuff, and why you need to get boots on the ground here and actually do some of this stuff, okay? That's my recommendation is you really want to come and go do these routes. Don't just rely on Google Maps. You want to get the feel because in Chicago, we have some of the worst traffic ever. All right. I'll give you an example. I was going back. I sort of get off track here, but give you an example. I was just talking to some clients. Northrop Park. It's let's say that you need to get downtown. Oh, Oak Park, it's the first suburb west. A lot of people from Chicago, a lot of people pick it because of that. Okay, if you live in the north part of town, it is going to take you most likely about 15 minutes just to get to the expressway. Whereas if you live sort of closer to the expressway, south side of town, it might take you a minute or two, 3 minutes. So you're talking about just through your town, just like South Naperville. If you're in way South Naperville, 95th Street, just to get to the train station is going to take you 20 minutes. So you need to really think about the reality of door to door. How are you going to get to where you're going to go and what that lifestyle is going to be like? Is it going to be driving? Where in the winter, sometimes we have these crazy storms. It might take you 2 hours. First time I moved out to DuPage County out west, the first day there was a massive storm. I had just moved out there. I got to go home. I was home in 5 minutes. My coworkers who still lived in Cook County, closer to Chicago, I think it took one of them 3 hours to get home. I'm not kidding you. 3 hours would normally a 50-minute ride. So those things come into play. We have construction, constant construction all the time. So you got to factor that into it. But some roads are just constantly under construction, and our traffic here is absolutely brutal. We have 5 of the busiest roads, expressways in the entire United States of America. 5 out of 10 are in Chicago. So that 10 miles west of Chicago might take you 45 minutes to get in, while the other city or that house that's just a little bit closer to the expressway where you need to get on. These are those micro things that you really need to think about. And Chicago has a ton of different options. And that's the thing. It's not always about distance. It's about options. It's about how you can get to downtown. Maybe you need flexibility. Is it going to be a drive? You really need to look into these things. And I tell people, I get this. A lot of people want to walk to the train. And once again, walkability. Are you willing to walk 15 minutes? And call me in February when it's 20 degrees out, not even 10 degrees out, and you made the decision that you're going to walk. Maybe you don't have a car, maybe you only have one car. So those are little nuances that you really need to consider and that I want to walk through with you. And what I'm doing with all my clients is I like to, because we have so many options, we have so many different places that you can choose from, and we have a very tight housing market that a lot of times we start steering off of what is important to you. So I want to bring you back all the time and say, hey, remember, the commute was super important to you. Well, let's not stretch now. Let's be patient and find that house that actually meets your criteria. And if commute's a huge part, and maybe it's not, but if it is, then you need to take these things into consideration and give me a call and I'll walk through some of the options that might make sense to you. Because as I said, 10 miles west, 20 miles west, 5 miles, none of that matters around here. All right, so what I want to talk about now is the vibe of the places that you're looking at. It's so hard to sort of get a feel for vibe when you're from afar and if you don't know the area. So here's the deal. When you talk about the Chicago suburbs, you can have one suburb that's right next to each other that has a completely different vibe, or maybe 15, 20 minutes away. You take a place like Oak Park. I talk about Oak Park a lot. That's where I'm from. Take a place like Oak Park where, you're really close to the city. You can walk to shops. You have you have multiple little quaint downtown sort of areas. You have the CTA, you have the Metro, right? So you have a lot of stuff going on. It's really a bustling, vibrant community. Very, like I said, very old architecture, things like that. And then 15 minutes west, you look at a place like Burr Ridge, where it's lots of new construction, 90s, 2000s, builds, that kind of a thing. Massive houses, bigger lots. Their downtown area, take a look at this. It's like you're in California, right? They don't really have a downtown. Their downtown is like a shopping mall versus some of these places, like I mentioned, like Oak Park or LaGrange or Downers Grove that have more of a traditional downtown area. So we have just a total different vibe between these different communities here in the suburbs, which is one of the things that makes it awesome, because you're going to be able to find a place that you jive in, right? And so a place like, Burr Ridge, you have, like I mentioned, bigger houses. You're talking about a median sales price of more like in the $950 range, where in Oak Park, you're talking like $650, $640-ish. So there's a big difference in price. That's also something that's going to drive you. But what I want you to get a feel for is the vibe of these communities and how different they can be. And that's important for your everyday life and how you want to live your life. So you want to take that into account. And that's why you want to give me a call, because you might say, hey, what's most important for me is that being able to walk to places, you know, having more of that community vibe where kids are all on the street and stuff like that. You know, Burr Ridge, you're probably not going to get that as much, where, you know, a place like LaGrange, like Oak Park, you're going to probably get that feel a little bit more. If you want that sort of more like that California vibe, more high-end strip mall type stuff, that is going to be a place like Burr Ridge, you know, that you might find that's going to work best for you. So it really depends on what's for you, but what I want you to know is that we have such a diverse communities here that you're going to be able to find your place. But you want to give me a call and I can help you figure out where to hone in based on what you want, what kind of vibe you want to live in. So we have tons of different vibes around here, and that is something that's awesome. It can be a little daunting, but it's something that's awesome because when you find that place, you're going to fall in love with it, I guarantee you. All right, let's talk about crime, something that you might be thinking about if you're moving to Chicago. If you haven't been here, you look at some of the headlines, there's a lot of talk about Chicago being a dangerous city, a violent crime. Now, I will tell you, Chicago can be dangerous. Not going to mess around, not going to joke about that. Now, if you look at actual, like, the most dangerous cities in the country, most of them are smaller cities. You know, East St. Louis, you know, it's not usually even the bigger cities because of the number of people and when you start getting into the per capita, but you are going to probably want to know a little bit about crime, and I'm here to talk about how you will probably feel in the Chicago suburbs and why what happens in the city doesn't generally spill over to the suburbs, but it does in a couple of them. And I want to talk to you about that. So what can you expect when you move here? Well, the truth is that most of the neighborhoods with good schools, high-priced homes generally have a pretty safe vibe to them, in my experience and the experience of my clients. There's a few communities, though, that what's interesting is you would think that the places that are safe, like, for instance, a place like Brookfield, according to neighborhood scouts here, is safer than like 94% of the entire any city in the United States. So according to neighborhood scouts, Oak Park is only safer than 6% of the places in the United States. That is a massive difference. That's like a completely diametric opposites. Yet, if you're moving here, you're going to find out Oak Park is way more sought after, generally speaking, than Brookfield. And there are some reasons for that, but that's why crime stats don't always equate to demand, or maybe equate to how you feel or don't feel comfortable, because thousands of people move to places like Oak Park and Evanston. Both of them have higher crime, mostly because of their proximity to the city. So one of the things that I tell people, my clients, is a couple things. If you're thinking about moving here and you've nailed down a couple of communities and you're a little worried about crime in one versus another one, is call the police department. Call the police department and tell them you're thinking about moving here. See if they have a beat officer or someone that you can have a conversation with so that you can feel comfortable. And my biggest tip that I talk to all my clients about, especially people that are not familiar with the area, is when you come here, walk around at night. If you are thinking about making an offer on a house, you want to go back to that house at night if you can, and there's not already 5 multiple offers or something like that, which happens a lot. You'll hear about that later on in this video, but I would recommend that. Turn your car off. See if you would feel comfortable walking around. If you think you'd let your kids outside. Is there a lot of noises at night? Maybe the next door neighbor has a bunch of parties, which isn't about crime, but it is about whether or not you're going to want to live there. So that's a little tip that I have for all my buyers, because what is comfortable for me in terms of safety and crime is not necessarily going to be the same for you. So in my experience, the Chicago suburbs, most of them have a great vibe. They feel very safe, and it's something that you're going to want to explore on your own. And crime stats can only do so much, because as I mentioned, you have a place like Oak Park that if you look at neighborhood scouts, you're probably like, how could anybody live there? It's only safer than 6% of all the other communities in the United States. Yet, you know, a lot of that is break-ins, you know, porch robberies, that kind of stuff. So anyway, so you want to dig a little deeper, like I say, dig deeper into the school stuff. And for me, it's so much of it is about the feel that you get when you're somewhere. So that's an important thing. You can't do that from afar. So you want to narrow that down, and then you want to walk these neighborhoods yourself to see if you feel comfortable there. And that's my advice to you when it comes to safety and crime in the Chicago suburbs. You're scared of buying a house and your taxes going up 30, 40, maybe even 50%? Well, if so, you want to watch this, because that can happen here in Cook County. There's a lot of parts of the country where I don't think this goes on. I know I've reached out to other agents around the country, other tax assessors, and what happens in Cook County is somewhat unique, And what happens is, check this out. It's crazy. It's very complicated. And it's one reason why you want to give me a call, because I pay a lot of attention to this for my own property taxes, but also for all my clients, and help walk through and try to explain this. And it can be very confusing and difficult, and it makes it challenging. And so listen to this. There is a time of year where you might be looking to buy a property and you have no idea what that next tax bill is. And if you buy it at the wrong year, that bill could skyrocket 30, 40, 50, 60%. Does that sound like something you don't want to get involved in? Well, I'm going to help you with that, right? And it can happen. It's not common, but what happens here in Cook County is every 3 years, we go through what's called a triennial reassessment. So every year, there is some part of Cook County being reassessed. And what that means is that every 3 years, wherever you buy a place, wherever you buy a home, the Cook County assessor is going to reevaluate what the assessed value is. And when that happens, if your assessed value shoots up like crazy, you could have, I've seen people have 40% increases in their tax bills. And the thing is, we pay taxes for the year before. So when that reassessment's happening, it's actually for the year before, and the bill, you're not even going to know what it is. So think about that. You might buy a house in March. There's a new reassessment that you see. For example, this house right here. This house here, 8 Stone Ridge Drive in South Barrington, is a perfect example. Look at this. It's on the market for $950,000. Now, Barrington is going through a triennial reassessment right now. The current market value, if you look here, assessed value is $600,000, and it's going up to $880,000, a 46% increase in the assessed value. You're probably going, wow, well, that means the taxes are going to go 46%, but that's not what that means, and that's a whole nother video. I mean, I can't get into all the minutia. It doesn't mean it's going to go 46%, but you can bet that you're going to probably have a pretty healthy tax increase, and you might be paying $925. The assessor says it's $880, so you have an even bigger chance that it's going to go up in 3 years. But so right now, if you buy this house, you have no idea if it's going to be a 46% increase, a 20% increase, a 30% increase, because the new tax bill is not out that represents what this 46% assessed value increase is actually going to do to your tax bill. So like a few years ago, when Oak Park was going through it, people were getting 25% increases in their assessed value and having 0 increase in their taxes. You might go, whoa, 25%. This is why it gets so confusing, because it has to do with what the average increase is. So anyways, if you want to know more, what I want you to drive home is look at this. 600, it's this home in South Barrington is assessed at $600. They're asking $925, and the Cook County assessor is now saying it's worth $880, a 46% increase. So that's the craziness that you have to deal with here in Cook County. Every 3 years, it's like a fight where they're going to get a reassessment letter. You have to try to appeal that. You have to either there's different ways to appeal, so reach out to me, because the most common one, recent sales, is probably not going to help you, because most of the time our homes are very underassessed. So Cook County taxes are this crazy, weird system. Every county or every village, every community has their own tax rate. So it's not like you can say, oh, the Cook County taxes are 2%. No, every community has its own. When the reassessments happen, they readjust the tax rates. It's just this shell game that it's really hard to figure out. But you want to give me a call, and what you don't want to have happen is you don't want to buy a house and then find out that its bill's going to go up 46%. And we never know exactly what's going to happen, but we can insulate ourselves and try to do our best to prevent. What I'm going to do is my best to prevent you from buying a house that is just going to have a skyrocketing tax bill. And more than anything, I don't want you to go in blind. I want you to make that decision, but I surely don't want to hide that from you, because once again, I'd rather you buy no house than the wrong house. So that's a little recap of the Cook County taxes, but if you want to know more, reach out to me directly, because they're complicated and I can walk you through a little bit more detail on how they work. But the Cook County taxes are crazy, and you need to be prepared for that, and you need to make sure when you're buying, you know if it's a reassessment year or not. And part of that is because you're going to be asking for the seller for a tax credit, which we can talk about. Give me a call about all this tax stuff, because I know it very well. One of my clients really helped me get versed in this. And as I've been selling real estate, I just learn and learn more and more so that I can help you make the right decision. All right, so those are some of the top things for you to be aware of if you're making a move to the Chicago suburbs, whether it be from in Chicago or from somewhere outside of the country. And if you want to know more about the Chicago suburbs, watch some of my other videos. I got a pros and cons of living in Oak Park, pros and cons of Brookfield, Oak Park versus LaGrange, why people are leaving Chicago. Check out some of my other videos, and if you like all this stuff, please subscribe. It really helps me out. And more importantly, if you're thinking about making a move here, give me a ring or a text. I'd love to chat and see how I can help you. Once again, not buy a house, but buy the right house, because I always would rather you not buy a house than buy the wrong house, and I see too many people buying the wrong house in the Chicago suburbs.